Hey guys! Tonight we trudge into the soft, shadowy corridors of history, where your eyelids start to feel like they're carrying bricks, and your mind drifts between curiosity and the pull of a cozy pillow. Imagine yourself in a dimly lit room, the air slightly warm, a fan whispering a gentle hum against your ears, while outside the stars peer down like sleepy spectators. You probably won't survive this without a yawn or two, but that's part of the fun. Tonight, we're going to explore the hidden world of sleep, ancient mysteries, and the inside story of the Egyptian pyramids. Yes, those monumental stone structures that loom across the sands, silent witnesses to the human fascination with rest, dreams, and perhaps even the afterlife. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, comment your location and your local time. Let's see who else is staying up past bedtime for this peculiar journey. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture yourself stepping through the veil of time, where the past smells faintly of smoke from evening fires, where the moonlight dapples across sleeping villages, and where humans, long before alarm clocks and digital reminders, had their own intimate relationship with darkness and rest. You trudge along dirt paths, past thatched roof huts, noticing families gathering around flickering lamps, murmuring lullabies, or reciting prayers that float like whispers into the night. Already you sense that sleep was never just a biological necessity. It was a ritual, a societal rhythm, a bridge between the tangible world and something more mysterious. It's not just about closing your eyes, it's about entering a state that the ancients revered, feared, and documented in fragmented hieroglyphs, tablets, and scrolls. You feel your shoulders relax, but your curiosity tingles, because what follows isn't just bedtime stories. It's the intersection of science, superstition, and human ingenuity. As you move forward, imagine those first humans in caves, wrapped in animal hides, their heads propped on stone or soft moss. They curl themselves, attempting to regulate temperature and fend off nocturnal predators, while the faint crackle of fire creates a rhythm that both soothes and warns. Some anthropologists suggest that early humans might have experienced segmented sleep, two distinct periods of rest interrupted by a few hours of quiet activity. Historians still argue whether this pattern was universal or varied dramatically depending on environment and culture. You peek into their dreams, wondering what flickers in the mind of someone staring at shadows dancing across rough stone walls. Did they dream of hunting? Of gods? Or did they simply drift into a weightless calm, untroubled by calendars or deadlines? That first yawn slips past your lips, but you fight it because there's a story here that bridges millennia, one that whispers through every fiber of modern rest. Already, your mind meanders to the Mesopotamians, Greeks, and Egyptians, civilizations that began to formalize and observe sleep with ritualistic seriousness. The Egyptians, in particular, developed an intricate tapestry of nighttime practices, from preparing the body and soul for rest, to recording the meanings of dreams, to designing their monumental pyramids that some suggest may have influenced rhythms of rest and meditation. Picture yourself slipping through a bustling Egyptian street at dusk, merchants closing shops, servants lighting oil lamps, and the scent of incense wafting through narrow alleys. Families spread mats and cushions, chanting prayers or silently reflecting, while cats, yes, those stealthy creatures we've long admired, curl around sleeping children. You probably won't survive this without feeling a hint of nostalgia, even for a culture you never truly lived in. Sleep wasn't a pause. It was an active, revered space where life, death, and divine intervention intersected. And as you walk past the looming silhouette of a pyramid, your imagination stretches, almost syncing with the vibrations of ancient stones, wondering how humans once negotiated rest and ambition under these immense monoliths. You settle slightly into this narrative, letting the soft cadence of imagined footsteps and murmured chants wash over you. The smell of night blossoms from papyrus, cooking fires and desert blooms, mixing into an aroma that feels strangely familiar and otherworldly at the same time. You sense the weight of history pressing gently on your shoulders, not heavy enough to crush, but palpable, inviting you to slow down, to breathe, to notice the rhythm of ancient life. And here's a cheeky thought. You're probably learning more about sleeping hundreds or thousands of years ago than you ever did in school, and all while your modern bed waits impatiently to claim you. That tension between staying awake to explore and surrendering to sleep is exactly what makes this journey deliciously precarious. You are both scholar and dreamer, wandering observer and participant, your presence stretching across continents and millennia in the span of a single night. And so, as your eyelids droop slightly, remember the journey isn't over. It's only beginning. Now imagine the walls around you lined with faint hieroglyphs, scribbles of men and women who pondered sleep long before electricity or city life. These markings whisper secrets, what dreams may come, the importance of rest, and perhaps even early theories of circadian rhythms, long before modern science formalized the concept. You see scribes recording details of sleep cycles, ailments that plague the resting body, and remedies that involve incense, milk, or odd poultices. One scholar still argues whether certain nocturnal rituals were purely spiritual or had tangible health benefits. You notice tiny details, the alignment of beds with windows to catch moonlight, the use of mats to keep cool, and the careful storage of oils meant to soothe aching muscles. Your imagination stretches across these centuries, tracing human patterns of waking and resting, noting the extraordinary lengths civilizations went to in honoring something so deceptively simple: sleep. And yes, you yawn again, but you fight it because, hey, this is the juicy part where sleep meets history, and you don't want to miss a single step along this soft, shadowed path. You trudge further back, past the sands of time into the prehistoric world, where humans are just beginning to chart their relationship with night. Picture yourself crouched in a shallow cave, the rough stone cool beneath your fingers, the scent of smoke curling from a fire pit that struggles against the darkness. You notice the flickering shadows on the walls, dancing like tiny spirits, and wonder how your ancestors made sense of these nightly performances. Sleep is not a luxury, it's a survival strategy. Predators roam outside, and the faint rustle of leaves is a constant reminder that resting comes with risk. Yet, humans persist, curling themselves into bundles of warmth and safety. Historians still argue whether our prehistoric forebears slept in a single, uninterrupted stretch, or adopted segmented sleep, drifting into a quiet period and then waking for a few hours of contemplation or activity before returning to slumber. You feel your own eyelids grow heavy as if the past itself is syncing with your internal clock, nudging you toward the mystery of early rest. You look closer and notice evidence of ritual, primitive carvings near the hearth, carefully arranged stones, maybe even traces of early bedding. Anthropologists suggest that early humans might have experimented with sleep hygiene far earlier than we thought. Blankets of animal hides, nesting spots elevated from damp ground, and subtle insulation techniques that protected them from cold and pests. You probably won't survive this without marveling at the ingenuity of people who had no modern tools, yet instinctively understood the necessity of comfort, safety, and rhythm. They wrapped themselves in furs, built makeshift pillows of moss, and huddled together for warmth, negotiating the dual challenge of rest and survival. And in the quiet moments, they may have dreamed, not just of hunting or fire, but perhaps of unseen spirits, cosmic patterns, or premonitions yet undeciphered. Those dreams were messages, or at least they were treated that way, forming the first threads of human interpretation of sleep as a gateway to something beyond mere biology. Your gaze drifts toward a moonlit opening of the cave, and you imagine the first humans noticing natural light as a cue for wakefulness. The phases of the moon dictated their rhythms as much as hunger or danger. They might have tracked celestial patterns, understanding in an intuitive way the cycles of night and day. You probably won't survive this without a subtle sense of wonder, because this early relationship between humans and sleep is intimate, tangible, and oddly poetic. Every yawn, every stretch, every whispered lull of wind through the cave's mouth is a testament to the human desire to surrender to rest while respecting the surrounding dangers. You imagine small rituals, soft chants to ward off spirits, the gentle patting of fellow sleepers, and perhaps a shared story whispered to ease the fear of the dark. Even without language as we know it, communication during rest seems almost sacred, a precursor to the complex beliefs that would emerge in later civilizations. Sleep, you realize, is already beginning to intertwine with culture. Even in this prehistoric landscape, certain behaviors suggest early recognition of its importance beyond physical restoration. Some anthropologists note the presence of carefully arranged sleep zones, perhaps designated for particular members of the group, suggesting early social structures influencing who rests, where, and how. Historians still argue whether these patterns were uniform across different regions or highly localized innovations responding to environmental pressures. You notice, too, traces of early experimentation with sleep aids. A crushed herb here, a simple aromatic leaf there, sprinkled near the sleeping area to calm the mind or repel insects. You feel an almost magical connection, imagining that these early humans were not merely surviving, they were beginning to understand the interplay between body, mind, and environment during sleep. And you can't help but chuckle at the thought, even tens of thousands of years ago, humans were subtly tinkering with what we now call sleep hacks. The quiet moments are punctuated by your own breathing, matching the imagined rhythm of ancient lungs filling and emptying in sync with the gentle crackle of fire. You notice that in these early communities, sleep is communal, almost ritualistic, and deeply intertwined with storytelling. Perhaps one person is whispering an account of a successful hunt, while another recounts a strange dream about a distant river or a mysterious creature. You probably won't survive this without recognizing that dreams were already portals into narrative, a precursor to literature, folklore, and the mystical traditions that would dominate civilizations later. You feel the intimacy of these nights, the way sleep becomes a shared human experience, a balancing act of biology, instinct, and imagination. Every subtle movement, every quiet murmur, contributes to an evolving tapestry of rest that will echo into the grand rituals of later cultures, including the Egyptians. As the fire dims and your mind drifts alongside these early humans, consider their fractured relationship with comfort. Uneven stone floors, occasional cold nights, and unpredictable threats. Yet they persisted, forging adaptive behaviors that speak to resilience and creativity. You imagine the first moments of realizing that darkness could be both dangerous and restorative, that sleep could heal, reset, and even inspire. Historians still argue whether some of the earliest symbolic behaviors, carvings, ritual burials, or proto-beds, were directly linked to preparing for sleep, or merely coincidental artifacts of daily life. You trudge onward, almost treading softly on these ancestral echoes, feeling the early seeds of human ingenuity taking root in the quiet of night. And you probably won't survive this without a tiny smile at how much has changed, and yet how much remains the same. Humans, somewhere, always negotiating sleep. Finally, you sense the gradual emergence of structure. Early humans observing sunrises, moon phases, and seasonal shifts, aligning their rest with natural cycles. Even without clocks, they developed rhythms that would eventually inform agricultural patterns, ritual calendars, and societal norms. You notice hints of nascent sleep culture, suggesting that the need for rest was not just physical, but deeply psychological and social. Perhaps one individual nods off near the fire, a protective companion humming a low, rhythmic tune to ensure safety and continuity. You probably won't survive this without acknowledging that sleep, even in its rawest, earliest form, is inherently communal and profoundly human, a theme that will continue to resonate as civilizations rise, including the grand monuments of Egypt. You stretch slightly, mirroring the ancient posture of those long-ago sleepers, and realize that the story of sleep is already entwined with survival, ritual, and imagination, setting the stage for the elaborate nocturnal tapestries that lie ahead. You step forward into the bustling streets of ancient civilizations, where the echoes of daily life mingle with the encroaching calm of evening. Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome unfold before your eyes, each presenting a distinct approach to sleep, yet all bound by the universal need to rest. Picture yourself wandering past Mesopotamian mud brick homes, the air scented faintly with baked clay and olive oil. Families gather around low tables sharing a final meal, while children stretch languidly on mats, eyes drooping with fatigue. You probably won't survive this without marveling at the structured rituals surrounding rest. In Mesopotamia, sleep was considered not only restorative, but communicative. Dreams were messages from gods, and specialized interpreters, dream priests, translated these visions to advise kings and citizens alike. Historians still argue whether every dream was taken seriously, or whether some were simply entertaining tales spun for social cohesion. You notice small carvings near doorways, talismans intended to protect sleepers from malevolent spirits, a nod to the intricate relationship between belief and rest. Drifting into ancient Greece, you sense a philosophical air, even at bedtime. You see citizens reclining on low couches, perhaps sharing anecdotes or recounting tragedies at symposiums before the evening draws on. Greeks believed that sleep was both natural and divine, a moment when the soul could detach from the body and wander, sometimes communicating with the gods. You probably won't survive this without a smirk at the idea of philosophers debating the ideal sleep posture. Some advocating firmness, others softness, each with a cosmic rationale. Sleep wasn't merely a biological necessity. It was a practice intertwined with reflection, study, and contemplation. The dream world served as a mirror to morality, desire, and social concerns. You imagine a young Athenian, half asleep, pondering the lessons of the day while the moon casts gentle light through lattice windows. The city hums softly, distant footsteps on cobblestones, and you feel the quiet rhythm of an entire civilization moving towards slumber, punctuated by rituals, prayers, and whispered reflections. Rome, in contrast, presents a more structured, sometimes extravagant view of sleep. Imagine walking past domes with their atriums softly lit by oil lamps, where affluent citizens indulge in layers of bedding, feather-filled mattresses, and even early forms of pillows stuffed with herbs for relaxation. You probably won't survive this without noting the Romans' obsession with comfort. They understood the practicalities of sleep for recovery, work efficiency, and social order. Nighttime was not purely private. It carried performative aspects. Wealthy families often employed attendants to monitor rooms, adjust coverings, or burn incense. Scholars still argue whether the stratification of sleep arrangements reinforced social hierarchies or merely reflected convenience. Across the city, poorer citizens rested on simpler mats, yet participated in communal practices that mirrored the rhythms of their wealthier neighbors. The constant balancing act between natural cycles and societal expectation underscores a fascinating tension: sleep as necessity versus sleep as statement. As you move through these civilizations, notice the interplay between architecture and rest. Mesopotamian homes often had recessed sleeping alcoves that separated private from public space, while Greek and Roman designs considered airflow, light, and ambient temperature. You probably won't survive this without admiring the foresight. Even without electricity or thermometers, humans intuitively engineered their environments to optimize rest. Some homes were oriented to catch prevailing breezes, while others took advantage of moonlight to illuminate paths safely. Scholars still argue whether these features were primarily for health, spiritual beliefs, or social status. In any case, you observe a continuity of thought, civilizations deeply aware that the quality of sleep affected every facet of life, from physical recovery to intellectual productivity. Quirky tidbits pepper this landscape. Romans reportedly sometimes used opium-laced concoctions or wine to ease into sleep, while the Greeks occasionally employed music or recited poetry aloud to facilitate relaxation. You probably won't survive this without a quiet laugh, imagining a philosopher lulling himself to sleep with epic verses, debating whether Homeric epics induce sweet dreams or restless nights. Sleep was never passive. It was curated, attended, and culturally framed. Even minor rituals, washing before bed, consuming specific foods, arranging bedding meticulously, demonstrate the sophisticated understanding these civilizations had of rest. Your footsteps echo alongside theirs, tracing a lineage that connects prehistoric instincts to deliberate, socially mediated sleep practices. You catch a glimpse of how dreams continued to hold immense significance. Mesopotamian clay tablets record elaborate interpretations. Greek philosophers documented nocturnal visions for moral and ethical reflection, and Roman elites often considered dreams as political omens. You probably won't survive this without noticing that humans across time imbued sleep with narrative power, a feature that will resurface spectacularly in Egyptian culture. The nightly cycle becomes a theater of hope, fear, and imagination, with each civilization layering its unique mythology, atop a universal experience. As you drift past lamplit corridors and cobblestone streets, the hum of ancient life fades, leaving you with a subtle awareness. Sleep, while biologically inevitable, is profoundly shaped by culture, belief, and the unrelenting human urge to find meaning, even in dreams. And as your own consciousness flutters on the edge of rest, you begin to glimpse the threshold of Egypt, where sleep, mystery, and monumental ambition converge in ways that will challenge everything you thought you knew. You now trudge into the heart of ancient Egypt, the golden light of dusk stretching across the Nile as boats drift lazily along its gentle current. You probably won't survive this without picturing the bustling streets of Thebes or Memphis, where merchants close their stalls, children chase each other past mud brick homes, and the scent of baking bread mingles with the earthy aroma of river mud. Sleep here isn't merely a biological necessity. It's woven deeply into daily routines, spirituality, and survival. You observe families spreading mats on stone or woven floors, carefully arranging cushions, and dimming lamps to ease eyes accustomed to daylight. Historians still argue whether sleep practices differed significantly between urban centers and rural villages, but patterns of preparation, hygiene, and ritual appear universally significant. The Egyptians understood instinctively that rest was a bridge between physical and spiritual worlds, a liminal space where ordinary life met divine forces. As night descends, notice the intricacy of sleeping arrangements. The wealthy recline on raised beds crafted from wood, sometimes decorated with painted motifs or adorned with soft linens, while servants or workers rest on woven mats closer to the ground. You probably won't survive this without imagining the contrast. The pampered luxury of a noble's chambers versus the humble simplicity of a laborer's mat, both participating in a shared cultural rhythm. Oil lamps flicker against walls, casting dancing shadows that seem almost alive, perhaps intended to guard against night spirits. Scholars still debate the extent to which such beliefs were superstitions versus structured spiritual rituals. You sense that even the simple act of arranging bedding or burning incense was an acknowledgement of both comfort and cosmic protection. Sleep was curated with intention, balancing physical relaxation with ritual observance. The Egyptians were meticulous about the timing of rest. You trudge past city gates and notice households adjusting schedules to the movement of the sun. Siestas were uncommon, but evening preparations were deliberate, washing the body, anointing with fragrant oils, and reciting prayers or protective chants. You probably won't survive this without smiling at the thought of early alarm systems, the crowing of roosters, the flow of Nile waters, or even human watchmen signaling both bedtime and awakening. Dreams were eagerly anticipated as messages from the gods. Some households recorded them, while priests offered interpretations, linking sleep directly to divine insight. Historians still argue whether dream interpretation was widespread or reserved for the elite, but the evidence suggests a pervasive belief in the significance of the night's visions. You observe sleep aids and nighttime rituals in action: incense burned to calm the mind, light herbs tucked near pillows, and careful attention to temperature by using layers of linens or positioning beds near cooler stone surfaces. You probably won't survive this without imagining the subtle scent of lotus flowers mingling with frankincense, floating softly through the air as children drift off into slumber. Even the hum of nighttime activity, guards patrolling, cats stalking prey, and the distant lapping of the Nile, seems incorporated into a conscious understanding of restful environment. Sleep wasn't passive, it was nurtured, protected, and in many ways celebrated as a vital part of life. Your journey continues past homes toward the outskirts, where laborers' quarters tell a different story. You probably won't survive this without noticing the contrast. Simple mats, minimal coverings, yet a similar attention to timing and ritual, albeit with fewer luxuries. Workers built the great monuments during the day and found ways to rest effectively by night. The rhythmic pounding of tools and clamor of construction gave way to silence, punctuated only by occasional night sounds that would have startled a city dweller. Scholars still argue whether workers' sleep was genuinely restorative or frequently disrupted by harsh conditions. But evidence of communal rest spaces, shared fires, and orderly mats indicates a system designed to sustain their energy and morale. Now, imagine the domestic details. The preparation of evening meals to coincide with rest. the careful storage of water for the night, and the placement of personal charms near sleepers' heads. You probably won't survive this without appreciating the nuanced understanding the Egyptians had of balance between body and mind, physical comfort, and spiritual safeguarding. These domestic rituals, mundane yet deliberate, are as telling as the grand temples or royal tombs, revealing a civilization where even the simplest act of lying down to sleep was deeply informed by culture, belief, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. Finally, you drift into the quieter, more introspective aspects of Egyptian nights. You notice the sounds of whispered prayers, the gentle shuffle of a servant adjusting a mat, and the faint fragrance of oils lingering in the air. You probably won't survive this without feeling that sleep in ancient Egypt was a multidimensional experience. It restored the body, prepared the mind for dreams, and served as a conduit to the divine. Historians still argue whether these practices were primarily spiritual, practical, or a hybrid of both. As you settle into the imagined nighttime rhythms of Egyptian households, you begin to sense the seamless integration of daily life, spirituality, and sleep, setting the stage for the deeper mysteries that will unfold inside the pyramids themselves. The night stretches on, inviting your consciousness to wander with those who rested here thousands of years ago, curious, cautious, and intimately attuned to the rhythms of life and afterlife. You drift further into the hazy corridors of ancient Egyptian consciousness, where the line between sleep and the divine blurs. Imagine yourself reclining on a soft mat, the faint aroma of lotus and frankincense curling in the air around you, as a low, distant chant hums from a nearby temple. You probably won't survive this without feeling the subtle thrill of entering a world where dreams aren't random flickers of the mind, but deliberate messages, possibly warnings, possibly gifts from gods who watch over mortal affairs. Egyptians believed that what you saw behind closed eyelids could guide decisions, reveal hidden truths, or even forewarn calamities. Historians still argue whether dream interpretation was reserved for royalty, priests, or the common citizen, but surviving records suggest a society deeply invested in the nocturnal theater of visions. As you settle deeper, imagine the meticulous rituals surrounding dreams. Priests often acted as mediators, recording dreams on papyrus or clay tablets, analyzing the symbols, and providing interpretations intended to influence real-world decisions. You probably won't survive this without marveling at the sophistication. A dream about a crocodile, for instance, could indicate danger from enemies, a political plot, or even personal betrayal, and your night slumber could suddenly feel like a suspenseful prelude to daylight events. Some dreams were treated with prescribed remedies or protective charms, amulets placed under pillows, recitations of spells, or ritual offerings meant to secure favorable outcomes. Scholars still debate whether Egyptians considered dreams direct interventions from gods or merely reflections of human anxieties projected onto a divine canvas. You wander mentally through an Egyptian household, imagining a child sleeping under the gentle watch of a parent who whispers protective phrases learned from generations past. You probably won't survive this without appreciating how dreams were part of education and moral guidance, with stories told during waking hours shaping the landscape of sleep. Certain hieroglyphs, still enigmatic today, suggest that dreams could serve as moral mirrors, instructing one on the consequences of behavior or the virtues of courage and piety. The interplay between conscious action and unconscious vision becomes palpable. Sleep is not just rest, but rehearsal, meditation, and spiritual dialogue rolled into one. Now, picture the societal dimensions. Merchants, artisans, and nobility all took dreams seriously, yet each class had different approaches. You probably won't survive this without noting that commoners often consulted local priests or seers, while elites might have entire dream libraries or private interpreters to parse the symbols. Even the smallest domestic decisions, where to place a bed, which herbs to burn, the timing of meals, were influenced by beliefs in the dream world. Historians still argue about the extent to which dreams directly dictated daily actions versus serving a more symbolic function. In any case, the evidence points to a culture that treated sleep as a potent, culturally significant interval where divine communication was possible, if interpreted correctly. You notice peculiar habits surrounding dream protection: oils rubbed on eyelids, charms tucked under pillows, and incense burned in precisely measured quantities. You probably won't survive this without quietly chuckling at the imagination of ancient Egyptians, who meticulously curated conditions for both sleep and the dream state. Some remedies might have been practical, repelling insects or soothing tension, but many held spiritual significance, meant to align the sleeper with cosmic forces. You almost feel the tension between mundane needs and mystical beliefs, a duality woven seamlessly into nightly routines. Dreams are taken seriously, but not without a playful, human acknowledgement of their strange unpredictability. Venturing further into the symbolism, you sense that the Egyptians distinguished between ordinary dreams and prophetic visions, with some dreams considered too potent or dangerous to ignore. You probably won't survive this without being drawn into the delicate dance of caution and curiosity. Some visions were recorded meticulously, others whispered only to trusted priests. The Egyptians saw sleep as a threshold, an opportunity to commune with gods or the spirits of ancestors, but one that demanded respect and careful navigation. Even the simplest domestic rituals, a gently extinguished lamp, a softly hummed prayer, became acts of spiritual insurance, a way of signaling readiness for the nightly passage between worlds. And so, as you imagine lying beneath a linen canopy, the faint light of stars filtering in through open windows, the Egyptians' philosophy of dreams envelops you. You probably won't survive this without sensing that sleep, in this context, is a profoundly active process, a time when the human mind negotiates with unseen forces, and where nocturnal visions carry weight far beyond the bedroom. Historians still argue whether all dream interpretations were taken literally, or whether some served as structured entertainment or social reinforcement. But the overall impression is clear. For the Egyptians, to sleep was to enter a dialogue with the divine, to participate in a world of symbolism, prophecy, and spiritual reflection. As you drift alongside them, you realize that dreams are not mere mental leftovers. They are vital threads in the fabric of human existence, intimately tied to belief, culture, and the night itself. You trudge further into the sensory landscape of ancient Egypt, where the act of falling asleep was never passive. It demanded attention, ritual, and sometimes a little ingenuity. You probably won't survive this without imagining the scent of burning frankincense mixing with the aroma of crushed herbs, a subtle olfactory lullaby designed to coax the mind into rest. Egyptians were inventive when it came to sleep aids, employing methods that ranged from practical to peculiar. Some used pillows stuffed with fragrant reeds, while others sprinkled water infused with herbs across mats to create a soothing, cool environment. Historians still argue whether these practices were widespread or largely reserved for the upper classes. But the sheer variety suggests a society deeply attuned to the nuances of slumber. Imagine yourself reclining on a mat in a small, candle-lit chamber. You probably won't survive this without noticing the ingenious simplicity of certain concoctions. Lavender, chamomile, and blue lotus were all used to relax the body and mind. Blue lotus, in particular, was prized not just for its calming properties, but also for its psychoactive qualities, a gentle nudge toward dreamlike states. Some individuals would inhale the smoke of particular incense blends, while others soaked linen cloths in aromatic oils to press lightly against their faces. These rituals were as much about mental preparation as physical comfort, shaping the transition from wakefulness to the suspended liminal space of sleep. You feel your own body begin to mirror these rhythms, your shoulders loosening, your breath lengthening in response to imagined ancient routines. Now, wander into the quirkier side of sleep aids. You probably won't survive this without a chuckle at the oddity of certain remedies. Powdered crocodile dung was reportedly used as a sunscreen by day, but experimental records hint at its occasional inclusion in night rituals, believed to ward off evil or bring vivid dreams. Other curious substances included honeyed ointments rubbed on the temples or small charms tucked beneath pillows. Historians still argue whether some of these practices were truly effective or primarily symbolic. Yet the consistent attention to nightly ritual reflects a deep cultural investment in optimizing rest. Sleep, it seems, was approached with a combination of science, superstition, and creativity, a testament to the Egyptians' desire to master the nocturnal hours. You notice that sleep aids extended beyond substances to structural innovations. Mats were carefully arranged to capture cooling breezes from the Nile. Beds were angled to maximize comfort and privacy, and small curtains or screens created microenvironments conducive to uninterrupted rest. You probably won't survive this without appreciating the subtlety. Even without modern HVAC systems, Egyptians understood airflow, temperature regulation, and the sensory environment in a remarkably sophisticated way. Scholars still debate whether these arrangements were driven more by practicality or ritual, but either way, the attention to detail is undeniable. Every element of the sleeping environment, from scent to bedding to ambient light, was calibrated to enhance rest, demonstrating a holistic approach rarely seen in other ancient cultures. Your imagination drifts toward communal aspects of sleep. You probably won't survive this without noticing that households often coordinated their rest, with some family members waking periodically to tend lamps, water jars, or incense, ensuring that sleep flowed smoothly for others. This creates a picture of rest not as an isolated act, but as a shared, almost choreographed experience, blending necessity, care, and cultural custom. It's easy to see how such patterns could reinforce social bonds while also maintaining practical efficiency in a society where work, rituals, and spirituality were closely intertwined. The fringe aspects of sleep preparation are fascinating. Imagine someone placing small amulets under their pillow, reciting protective spells, or performing subtle gestures meant to attract positive dreams. You probably won't survive this without realizing how seriously Egyptians took the unseen realm of the night. Even the humblest home contained these layers of ritual: aromatic plants, protective charms, carefully timed prayers. Sleep wasn't just about physical rest. It was a negotiation with the unknown, a dialogue between the tangible world and forces invisible yet influential. Scholars still argue whether certain practices were primarily preventive, therapeutic, or symbolic, but the diversity of approaches suggests that Egyptians embraced sleep as a multidimensional experience. And so, as you sink deeper into the imagined scent, texture, and rhythm of ancient nights, you understand that sleep aids were more than mere conveniences. They were tools, symbols, and rituals intertwined with culture, science, and belief. You probably won't survive this without sensing that the Egyptians' attention to the sensory and spiritual dimensions of sleep transformed an ordinary human need into a profound cultural practice. From fragrant oils to ingenious bedding arrangements, every aspect of nightly rest was orchestrated to bridge the gap between body, mind, and the mysterious liminal world that awaited in dreams. The night stretches ahead, inviting your consciousness to follow these carefully curated paths into the depths of ancient Egyptian slumber, where curiosity, ritual, and imagination entwine seamlessly. You trudge closer to the monumental edges of Egyptian ambition, the pyramids themselves, rising like massive stone sentinels against the desert sky. You probably won't survive this without being struck by their sheer scale, the way the sun casts long, stretching shadows across each limestone block, as if the structures themselves are breathing slowly with the rhythm of time. Sleep and rest, you begin to notice, intersect with human ambition here in a striking way. These pyramids weren't merely tombs or monuments. They were carefully aligned with celestial patterns, possibly designed to influence not just the afterlife, but the dreams and meditative states of those who built, prayed, and lingered near them. Historians still argue whether the pyramid's orientation was purely practical, tracking solstices and cardinal points, or spiritually symbolic, bridging Earth and cosmos through geometry and ritual. As you wander through the imagined construction sites, the daily toil of thousands of workers seems almost cinematic. You probably won't survive this without marveling at how rest was meticulously interwoven with labor. Laborers slept in organized quarters, sometimes communal mats, sometimes simple stone platforms. They rose before dawn to continue hauling limestone blocks, driven by both necessity and devotion. Archaeologists suggest that scheduling sleep strategically was essential. Insufficient rest could jeopardize both productivity and safety, yet over-resting risked delaying monumental projects. The Egyptians clearly understood the balance between fatigue and performance. You can almost feel the dusty heat, the tension of human muscles, the relief when, at dusk, a worker finally sinks onto a mat, the Nile's cool evening breeze soothing sweat-soaked skin. Sleep was not optional. It was a vital tool in a massive, orchestrated human endeavor. You notice that some workers' sleep routines included small rituals meant to ensure both physical and spiritual protection. You probably won't survive this without imagining them whispering prayers to deities like Khnum or Hathor, or arranging small charms near their pillows to keep nightmares at bay. Historians still argue about the exact role of these minor rituals. Were they purely symbolic, or did they have practical purposes, like discouraging vermin or providing aromatic relief? Regardless, these details reveal a consistent pattern. Sleep in ancient Egypt, even for the working class, was far more than a pause from labor. It was a conscious, managed experience, intertwined with beliefs, environment, and community structure. Now, shift your gaze to the overseers and architects. You probably won't survive this without noticing their unique routines. Elite workers and planners had access to quieter quarters, softer bedding, and sometimes even scheduled periods for meditation or contemplation, blending rest with planning and reflection. Some scholars suggest that these carefully managed sleep periods allowed for creative problem-solving, necessary when orchestrating projects of such scale. Imagine an overseer, reclining on a low wooden bed, gently fanning himself, inhaling the faint scent of herbs as he mentally calculates the precise angle of a newly laid block. Sleep here isn't just physiological, it's cognitive, creative, and spiritual. It prepares the mind for monumental thinking, for strategies that bridge human capacity with divine inspiration. You probably won't survive this without a subtle shiver of awe at how the Egyptians harmonized ambition with care for the human body and mind. The fringe aspects are just as captivating. Some texts hint that workers and priests used mild sedatives, herbs or aromatics, to ease the transition into sleep, especially after grueling days or ritual duties. You probably won't survive this without imagining the smell of crushed blue lotus mingling with the dry desert air, a faint hum of chants carrying across the camp, easing both body and mind. Historians still debate whether these practices were widely adopted or isolated to select individuals, but they underscore a culture deeply invested in managing fatigue, creativity, and spiritual engagement simultaneously. Even the night air seems orchestrated. Pathways between quarters are designed to allow quiet movement, minimizing disturbance, and allowing rest to flow uninterrupted, reinforcing the meticulous attention to the environment that Egyptians consistently demonstrated. You wander further, tracing the rhythms of night near the pyramids. You probably won't survive this without appreciating that sleep, here, functions on multiple levels: restorative, cognitive, and spiritual. The constant interplay between labor and rest, ambition and reflection, body and belief, creates a nocturnal tapestry unlike anything you've imagined before. Every detail, from bedding placement to incense burning, from chants to whispered prayers, illustrates an intimate knowledge of human needs and a deep desire to harmonize earthly efforts with cosmic order. Scholars still argue whether this integration was intentional engineering or a natural evolution of culture, but the result is undeniable. The pyramid's construction is inseparable from the rhythms of human rest and sleep. Finally, as you step back and observe the massive silhouettes against the night sky, you sense the delicate balance the Egyptians achieved between human endeavor and nightly restoration. You probably won't survive this without recognizing that these structures, monumental as they are, depend not just on stone and labor, but on carefully orchestrated patterns of human sleep, ritual, and attention to detail. The workers, priests, and architects alike created a culture where rest, dreams, and ambition intertwined seamlessly, preparing minds and bodies for the Herculean tasks demanded by both life and the afterlife. And as the desert night stretches on, cool and whispering, you realize that to understand Egyptian achievement, you must first understand the intimate nocturnal world that fueled it. A world where sleep is both sacred and strategic, as vital to history as any limestone block. You wander past the sleeping quarters and into the shadowed corridors of temple precincts, where priests maintain a rhythm of vigilance even as most of the city slumbers. You probably won't survive this without feeling the subtle tension in the air, a mixture of devotion, quiet authority, and the solemn awareness that their own sleep is as much a spiritual responsibility as it is a biological need. Temple priests carefully monitored their cycles, ensuring that rituals, offerings, and nightly prayers occurred precisely on schedule. Historians still argue whether these nocturnal duties were more about religious devotion or social control. But the pervasive influence of temple routines on daily life is undeniable. You sense that sleep in this context is layered with responsibility. A pause from labor, yes, but also a conduit for maintaining cosmic order, ensuring the gods are honored, and the spiritual machinery of the city remains uninterrupted. Imagine yourself reclining on a mat in a quiet chamber within the temple, the faint smell of incense curling in the air. You probably won't survive this without noticing how sensory elements, fragrant oils, flickering lamps, soft linen, were meticulously orchestrated to induce calm and focus. The Egyptians intuitively understood that sleep required preparation, that the transition from wakefulness to rest was as important as the rest itself. Priests may have employed gentle chanting, recitations of sacred texts, or rhythmic drumming to create a hypnotic environment conducive to dream receptivity. Scholars still debate whether these rituals directly influence the content of dreams or merely serve to calm the mind, but the interplay between sensory input and the subconscious is unmistakable. You drift toward the esoteric side of temple life. Dream incubation. You probably won't survive this without being intrigued by the practice of placing sleepers in sacred chambers or near statues to attract specific visions. Egyptians believed that the divine could communicate through dreams, and carefully curated environments increased the likelihood of meaningful nocturnal experiences. Some chambers were designed to align with celestial patterns or to amplify certain atmospheric conditions: cool air, gentle drafts, and the subtle murmur of water channels, creating a liminal space where reality and the dream world could blend. Historians still argue about the efficacy of these methods, but the intentionality behind them demonstrates a culture that viewed sleep as both functional and mystical. Now, turn your attention to the interaction between priests and the populace. You probably won't survive this without picturing ordinary citizens arriving with accounts of troubling or mysterious dreams, seeking guidance and interpretation. Priests acted as mediators, translating visions into advice, omens, or ritual prescriptions. Dreams about snakes, rivers, or celestial bodies could prompt prayers, offerings, or minor adjustments in daily life. Scholars still debate whether these interventions were consistently followed, or if they sometimes served as performative displays of authority, but the pattern reveals the enormous cultural weight attributed to sleep and dreams. Even the simple act of recounting a dream was a socially binding event, reinforcing hierarchies, shared beliefs, and communal narratives. Quirky details emerge as you explore temple nights. You probably won't survive this without imagining priests using small physical props, amulets, carved figurines, or scented oils, strategically positioned to influence the content of sleep. Some texts suggest experimental practices, like reciting specific phrases while the sleeper inhaled aromatic vapors, intended to guide dreams toward desired outcomes. Historians still argue whether these experiments were widespread or localized to elite practitioners, but they highlight a sophisticated understanding of the interaction between mind, body, and environment during rest. Sleep here transcends mere biology. It becomes a conscious tool for spiritual exploration and guidance. The temple's nocturnal rhythm extends beyond sleep to preparation for the coming day. You probably won't survive this without noticing that even the act of waking was ritualized. Gradual illumination with lamps, gentle water washes, and the recitation of prayers to align the mind with divine order. This continuity between sleep and wakefulness mirrors the Egyptians' larger worldview, in which every action, rest, and dream participates in the cosmic balance. Historians still argue whether these daily cycles were more about piety or maintaining social structure, but the meticulous care afforded to rest and awakening is unmistakable. Every detail, scent, sound, bedding arrangement, reinforces a seamless integration of physical and spiritual maintenance. As you drift through these quiet chambers, the overarching impression emerges. Sleep in the temple precincts is not private, passive, or incidental. You probably won't survive this without realizing that it is purposeful, orchestrated, and deeply entwined with societal, spiritual, and even political dynamics. Priests model behavior, facilitate divine communication, and ensure that both the body and mind of the community remain aligned with cosmic expectations. You sense that the nocturnal world of temple life, with its rituals, incantations, and carefully arranged sleep, forms an essential underpinning for the grandeur of Egyptian civilization, preparing both the ordinary and the elite for the next day and the next vision of the gods. You step into the shadowed chambers of royal households, where sleep is not merely restorative, but a marker of status, power, and intricate ritual. You probably won't survive this without imagining the soft rustle of fine linens, the gentle flicker of oil lamps, and the faint scent of myrrh or lotus oil, all orchestrated to create a space of calm and reverence. Pharaohs and high-ranking officials approached rest with meticulous care. Beds were elevated, padded, and carefully positioned according to both comfort and symbolic alignment. Historians still argue whether the precise placement of royal bedding had astrological significance or was primarily meant to display authority and wealth, but the evidence suggests that sleep in royal quarters was both functional and performative. Imagine reclining on a cushioned bed with silk and linen sheets, your head resting on a pillow stuffed with aromatic herbs. You probably won't survive this without noticing the subtle complexity of these arrangements. Different herbs serve different purposes, from relaxation to dream enhancement, and even to protection against malevolent spirits or ill omens. Royal sleepers were often attended by servants or attendants, ensuring comfort and smooth transition into rest. Scholars still debate whether these attendants merely attended to physical needs or if they also guided dreams or ritual preparations, but their presence underscores how sleep, even for the elite, was an orchestrated event. Now focus on the nightly rituals. You probably won't survive this without imagining the recitation of prayers or protective spells before closing one's eyes. Incense burned, small amulets were tucked beneath pillows, and symbolic gestures were performed to secure peaceful sleep and auspicious dreams. The Egyptians believed that sleep was a conduit to the divine, and for the royal class, this connection was crucial. Dreams could reveal messages from gods, guidance for decisions, or warnings about political intrigue. Historians still argue whether these practices were superstitious, therapeutic, or a combination, but their consistency highlights a profound cultural respect for the night's liminal space. Consider the peculiar, fringe practices in royal sleep. You probably won't survive this without smirking at reports of experimental concoctions, mild sedatives or dream-inducing herbs, administered to enhance or manipulate sleep states. Some texts suggest that specific oils were massaged into the temples or inhaled to encourage vivid visions. Scholars still debate the effectiveness and purpose of these methods, but they exemplify an advanced understanding of human psychology, physiology, and the interplay between environment and mental state. Sleep here is treated as a laboratory, a sacred experiment, and a spiritual journey all at once. As you move your imagination through the royal quarters, note the architectural elements supporting sleep. You probably won't survive this without admiring the thoughtful design. Raised platforms for airflow, screens for privacy, and positioning beds to catch gentle breezes or moonlight. Even light and shadow were considered. Too much exposure could disturb rest. Too little could invite spirits. Scholars still argue whether these designs were intended to maximize physical comfort, spiritual protection, or both, but their sophistication is undeniable. Sleep becomes a delicate orchestration of multiple factors, where every detail, bedding, herbs, airflow, light, and ritual contributes to an optimal nocturnal experience. Royal dreams held particular weight. You probably won't survive this without imagining a pharaoh waking from a vision of a crocodile, a star, or a river, consulting priests to decode its meaning, and adjusting political or personal decisions accordingly. Dreams could influence alliances, military plans, or domestic policies, turning sleep into a space of both personal restoration and statecraft. Historians still argue whether dream interpretations genuinely guided actions or were formalities, yet the link between slumber and decision-making highlights the cultural centrality of sleep. Even in opulent chambers, sleep is never passive. It is intentional, charged, and intricately woven into both daily life and cosmic order. Finally, as you imagine the quietude of a royal night, the city muted beyond thick walls, you realize that the Egyptians' approach to sleep combined luxury, ritual, and spiritual insight. You probably won't survive this without appreciating that rest, dreams, and preparation were inextricably linked to status, power, and societal functioning. The royal nocturnal world becomes a lens through which the broader culture's values, beliefs, and ingenuity are magnified, offering you a profound perspective on the intersection of human needs and divine ambition. Here, sleep is an art, a science, and a spiritual conduit rolled into one. You drift now into the more private, intimate quarters of Egyptian life, away from the grandeur of royal chambers and temple precincts. You probably won't survive this without noticing the hum of ordinary households winding down, the subtle noises of families preparing for night, clay jars set aside, small lamps flickering low, and children nestling into mats with the comforting presence of a parent nearby. Sleep for commoners, while less luxurious than that of the elite, was equally structured and ritualized. Historians still argue whether these routines were adopted purely for comfort or if they carried inherited spiritual significance, but evidence suggests that even modest families were deliberate about preparing for rest. Imagine yourself sitting on a simple mat in a mud brick room, the floor smooth but cool under your legs. You probably won't survive this without noticing the delicate arrangement of the bedding. Mats layered with reeds or linen, a small pillow at the head, sometimes infused with herbs like mint or coriander to calm the body. Even the simplest touches reflected careful thought. Parents whispered prayers or gentle chants, encouraging good dreams and warding off evil spirits. Scholars still debate how widespread these practices were among the lower classes, but textual and archaeological clues indicate a culture that valued intentional, protective, and comfortable sleep across all levels of society. Now, picture the nightly preparations in these households. You probably won't survive this without imagining a mother or older sibling carefully extinguishing lamps, adjusting mats to catch the coolest evening breeze, or arranging small charms near the sleeping area. Some families recited prayers invoking gods like Bes, a protective deity associated with households, music, and domestic joy. These actions might seem quaint or even superstitious today, but they reflect a nuanced understanding of sleep as a multi-dimensional experience: physical rest, spiritual safeguarding, and emotional reassurance. Historians still argue whether protective rituals primarily served symbolic purposes or had psychological effects that genuinely eased tension and anxiety, but the care evident in household routines is unmistakable. Sleep aids in ordinary homes could be as simple as aromatic plants tucked near the head, gentle water sprays to cool the air, or the rhythmic hum of a lullaby. You probably won't survive this without noticing how these subtle elements create a soothing environment that encourages relaxation. Even without elaborate tools or luxury materials, families orchestrated conditions that respected human physiology and emotional needs. The interplay of scent, temperature, texture, and gentle sound reflects an intuitive grasp of the sensory elements that promote healthy sleep, showing that attention to rest transcended social hierarchy. Some fringe practices also emerge among commoners. You probably won't survive this without imagining small, handmade amulets or figurines tucked under pillows, believed to attract pleasant dreams or repel malevolent forces. Sometimes herbal concoctions or lightly spiced oils were applied to temples or wrists to calm nerves before bed. Scholars still debate whether these were pragmatic, symbolic, or a hybrid of both, but they highlight a remarkable continuity across Egyptian society. Sleep was universally valued, curated, and protected. Even in the simplest home, rest was treated with deliberation and respect, a nightly ritual imbued with both practicality and belief. The communal aspect of sleep was equally important. You probably won't survive this without picturing families coordinating their schedules, sharing space, and occasionally monitoring one another's rest, reinforcing bonds and ensuring safety. Children learned from elders, mimicking bedtime rituals that blended comfort, spiritual practice, and social structure. Sleep here is a socially embedded experience, balancing personal restoration with communal care. This interplay emphasizes how Egyptian culture integrated physical, emotional, and spiritual dimensions of rest, making sleep a cohesive, shared, and culturally meaningful practice. Finally, as the night deepens in these ordinary homes, you sense that rest, dreams, and protective rituals form an invisible web connecting all layers of society. You probably won't survive this without appreciating that the Egyptians' approach to sleep was comprehensive, intuitive, and remarkably uniform. Every household, whether humble or opulent, structured rest with intention, integrating comfort, ritual, and vigilance. Even the smallest domestic actions, adjusting mats, whispering prayers, or sprinkling herbs, reflect a culture that understood sleep as a critical, multi-layered dimension of life, seamlessly blending physiology, psychology, and spirituality. And as you imagine these quiet domestic scenes, you realize that ordinary sleep, like monumental architecture, is deeply entwined with the rhythm of Egyptian civilization.